tell you this. I was in Newark, where I was born. There was a club called Sparky J's. It was on William Street and Halsey Street on the corner. I heard Horace Silver in that club. And actually, the tenor player that was playing with Horace, I had suggested he go to Horace's audition. And he made the audition. It was him and Cecil Bridgewater. So I heard Horace there. Then I went across the street at the Key Club. Heard Sonny Stitt there.
Wow.
Then I went around the corner, just walking distance, walked around the corner, the Douglas Hotel. And there was Stanley Turrentine with the organ trio.
Are you kidding me?
Serious. And it cost me less than $5.
Man.
That's what it was in those days, man. It wasn't that long ago. I mean, I can remember like it was yesterday.
So what, are you talking about the 60s and 70s?
Yeah, well, in the 60s, it was hard for me to get in the clubs because they were very strict about the age.
Oh, you were under 18 or something.
Right. You see, my sister would take me. She would babysit.
Right.
And I would be with her and her boyfriend. And that's how I was able to get into those clubs. And then my sister's ex-boyfriend, who was locked up in Broadway State Prison for killing 3 people with his bare hands.
Damn.
He learned how to play trombone. And my parents, my mother especially, would correspond with because his family, he didn't have family. So he found out I played an instrument. So he started sending me music and articles, and he talked about the musicians in Newark, told me who to check out, you know. He would take me to the clubs. And he was big. He was like 6'6", and very muscular. I remember the person at the door at the front room said, "Hey, you were here last week. I told you couldn't get in." He just pushed him aside. He's with me.
Wow.
In the front room, man, I had a chance to see Wes Montgomery. He was there in June of 1966 when I graduated high school. I didn't go, and right after that, he died.
Oh.
Green was there. Sonny Rollins played there. You had Jack McDuff. I saw Art Blakey group, like a band of midgets. He had Frank Mitchell. You ever hear of him?
Yeah.
He recorded with Lee Morgan, and he recorded Art Blakey called Buttercorn Lady.
Okay.
It was Chuck Mangione on trumpet. Keith Jarrett on piano, was not playing anymore. Junie Booth on bass, and Art Blakey. Wow. That was a great band. And Frank was around my age. He was a little bit older than me.
Man, it's too bad you didn't take your tape recorder every night.
Hey, I know. I taped some of Sonny Stitt. I don't know what the tapes are, but I heard Sonny a lot.
Wow.
And just tell me this little story here. I know it's late. I gotta tell you this. My father took me here, Sonny Stitt. I was 14. They built him as the world's greatest saxophone player. I think I told you this. I heard Gene Ammons. I said, no. Gene Ammons is the greatest. So I'm sitting there in the front early. He's coming in there late. I said, he looked like a has-been. I'm sitting there like, he can't play. Man, he took out his horn. He played a little sloppy scale. I said, man, he counted off for 10. Bam, 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 bam. He started playing the alto, then he played the tenor. I was sitting like that. I'm serious, man. So what? Then I went back to meet him. He had a little taste. He asked me what a whole note was, how many keys on the saxophone. Then he invited me to his hotel room. My father took me there, and he found out I played clarinet. He said, you should butcher clarinet too. He played clarinet too. I never heard him play clarinet.
I never heard that either.
But he told me he could play clarinet. And, he was showing me some stuff, but I had just started playing, But then you fast forward, and I lived in Bedford-Stuyvesant on Halsey Street between Nostrand and Marcy. He was playing at the Blue Cornet, a very well-known club in Brooklyn. Right. Everybody played there, including Train, Sonny Rollins. I had a list of players every week. Jackie McLean, Mongo Santa Maria, Thelonious Monk, Milt Jackson, week after week. That's what was going on in Brooklyn. Yeah. So I went to play. I sat in with Sonny Stitt, the Blue Cornet. Every saxophone player in Brooklyn was there. that played, including Roland Alexander and Gerald Hayes, Bill Saxon came in, and everybody. And Sonny was still drinking and fooling around. The next year, he came back. I went there, and I had been practicing a lot. I learned a lot from Sonny Stitt from the records. I went there, it was just me and him. It was nobody else. James Weidman was on piano. He reminded me he was playing piano. Scobie Stroman was on drums. He was also a dancer. And man, I think Yanni Zawadi recorded it. Just me and him. I played with him. I played the whole set with him. And he gave me the thumbs up. We played Cherokee. We played everything that I learned from him. But he played, check this out, he played All God's Children Got Rhythm. I didn't know it. He played that tune so fast. I just stood up there. He played so fast, his lines are going like that. Perfect, everything perfect. I never heard nobody play tenor that fast with that much fluidity and just lines. It was incredible, man. And then I got a chance to take him back to his hotel in Manhattan. I think the President Hotel. And we talked about the old days. I told him I was playing with Panama Francis. So you playing with the old guys. I talked about Charlie Parker. He said he had that style before he heard Barry, but that's what he said.
You and I disagree about that.
Right. Talked about Lester Young, Coleman Hawkins. He gave me a whole history of the saxophone, man. And just to hear that and to be in his presence with this giant of a saxophone player, I'll never forget that. And when he died,
did he ever talk about his practice? I understand he had a keyboard at home and that he could play through the chords of all the tunes and all sorts of piano. But we never get to hear these discussions too much of how cats practice. I thought once he said that he practiced 8 hours a day for 10 years straight or something. Is any of this true? Did he ever talk about that?
No, but I know he practiced slow. He practiced very slow. When you practice slow, you can play fast. Some people practice fast and then they're not clean. As you can hear, Sonny was clean. Really There's a record he did in Storyville in Boston. You ever hear that record? He plays alto, tenor, and baritone.
Yes. Yeah, I had that.
I heard that record. I was coming from a gig. I was at this gas station in Harlem. I'll never forget. I put my head on the window. I said, oh my goodness. He just jumped from one instrument to another, and he practiced incessantly, but it was very slow.
That's interesting.
Yeah. That's another music I cried.
He really understood the harmony, and but we don't get to it. I'm a little sad that sometimes people didn't talk to Charlie Parker, Train, Sonny Stitt, ask them what's your practice? What do you practice on the piano? I'm always so curious. Phil was lived long enough to talk about this stuff, and Phil was all about the piano, as you know. Every student that came in, can you play piano? Play piano for me, So, and I understand Dizzy told Miles that, right? That, if you want to learn, you got to go play piano. And Miles did learn piano, And I had read that Sonny Stitt said that he sat there like George Coleman playing, all these tunes on piano,
Right.
And then he knew some ridiculous number of songs in his head. He said, I forget what the number was. It was some huge number. Which seems to be true because every time we go here and play, he's calling off these tunes.
Yeah.
And he knew them all like backwards and forwards.
Sure did.
And then somebody else told me, Bobby Buster told me. You remember Bobby Buster used to play organ up in New Haven?
No.
You know how Stitt would hire the local cats every town he went to, and Bobby was the organ player. Always have a brother. It's a brother. I think Eddie Buster and Bobby Buster lived up in New Haven, and he said sometimes Stitt would come and be in a bad mood. Something he had an argument with his old lady or something, so he would stomp off some tune, some strange key. He said one night Stitt came in with this bad look on his face, and maybe he called body and soul or something, but he said he did it like this. He said 1, 2, 3 B, and then he started Then he started playing in B. And Bobby said,
Wow.
I couldn't find shit. Right when he was done, Sid turned to him and said, motherfucker, I thought you could play.
Yeah.
And then he get mad, call off a tempo after that, you know. You know,
Mhm.
that's some old school stuff that only comes from being immersed completely in the music. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You can't.
Well, Odin Pope told me a story in Philly. They would have on Sundays, they would have these jam sessions and have a featured guest started off, they played the first set. So Lee Morgan, he kept there sitting up in the front, waiting, he'd have his horn open. So they weren't supposed to play in the first set. He was ready to play with Sonny Stick. So Sonny looked at him, he said, okay, you look like you're ready to play, huh? He said, yeah. He was kind of arrogant, he could play, He called off Cherokee real slow. He couldn't get it. Or it was a different key, might have been in B or something, you know. So Stick will surprise you. You gotta be careful. You
Right.
can't go in there and think you arrogant, you play better and all that kind of stuff. Gotta be careful.
Right. That's old school, man.
Yeah.
All
George
of
Coleman could do that too.
Yeah, George Coleman do that too. I know he created quite the ire of some people doing that later. I know about
Yeah.
that. It's it seemed when we got to the 80s and stuff, that whole feeling of jazz may have left the environment, if you know what I mean. That old
Mhm.
bebop, I'm gonna call a tune in a different key and play the bridge in 3 and stuff. And that's so,
Kept it interesting, right?
it, it was a special time, man. You've got so many great stories, man. I'm gonna have to figure out how to splice this
Oh.
one up into like 4 different segments. Man, I've enjoyed it, man. It's good seeing you. I know it's 10:58 your time, right? So
Wow. Thanks for having me, Marshall. It was a pleasure.
man, it's
All the
great.
time I've known you, we play together, we talk a little bit, and the gig is over, we go our separate ways. But this is nice getting together like this. The only time you can do that is when you're on the road with somebody and get a chance to hang out and talk, because you're on the bus for hours. You
Right.
get a chance to talk about things, that's nice. But other than that, it's a drag. Or going to clubs. A lot of clubs in New York, you hang out like
Right.
Bradley's. You have play people. They talk about things and discuss music, and it's nice. And especially now with this pandemic, man, this is rough.
Uh,
So
yeah, man.
even though we're doing it like this, it's great to hear your stories. Communicate with you.
It was great, man, and it's interesting what you said, because that was the Basie band. I left the band in 2018, but I did a long time, as you know. But the Basie band always calls itself the Basie family, because at
Yeah,
first you weren't really allowed to sub out in that band. It had to be the same personnel,
right.
even when Basie ran the band, if you notice, the personnel was the personnel. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
subs are very rare, and you do get to know everybody on the band bus. You do become family. You know everything. I mean, but it makes the music so organic and so special. And
Yeah.
that's it. I've told this story on other interviews about Frank West when I called him up and asked him about stuff, and he said, you guys will never play like we did, man. We played 300 nights a year. We were so immersed in that music, and we knew each other so well, and like we were like family, and we knew everything we were putting on every note. And he said it's just not possible doing that 60 to 80 nights a year. It's like
That's right. That's
you know
true.
and and
Absolutely.
I remember another cat told me, you probably know Jed Levy, right? Tenor
Name
player.
sounds very familiar. No, I
Jed,
don't know.
Jed Levy said he went out with McDuff when he was young,
Mm-hmm.
and he basically said those years of playing with McDuff is what taught him how to play jazz, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me 20, 30 years later, I'm still playing off those years with McDuff.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, Sometimes, like we would battle because we're both Virgos. And I remember a gig we did, the last gig I did with him in St. Louis, all the musicians from the Midwest had left the band, so just me and Joe Dukes left.
Mm-hmm.
So we hired the baritone player, the tenor player, was it 2 tenor players, because the other tenor player left, and guitar player in St. Louis. So I was the horn leader, but I was sitting far away from Jack. He called the tune, and then he wrote a tune called Jive Turkey and another tune, number 80. And I got it confused. Jack was playing one tune, we were playing something else. He starts yelling at me. So I didn't take that stuff. I said, man, it's not my fault. You should have made sure we were ready, blah, 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 blah. We're going back and forth. So he said, alto player, play your ballad. You know, like that. He was real mad. I was the alto player. My ballad was I Want to Talk About You. And that's the best I ever played that tune because I was mad, I was angry, and he was mad, angry. But when I played that tune, I got standing ovation, you know. So that's how I dealt with Jack. If he would make me upset, I would try to play the best I could. And you know, he was funny with the money. And so I asked him, I said, well, what are we playing next? I called him up. He said, well, either Denver or Indianapolis. I said, which one is paying more? He said, Denver, 6 nights. I said, well, let's go to Denver. Oh, man, that's too far. We're going to Indianapolis. It was for a weekend gig, Friday and Saturday. I said, I can't survive like that on weekend gig. He had a girlfriend in Indianapolis. He could stay with her. I had to pay her my hotel bill. I said, Jack, I'll see you back in New York. And then I got a gig up in Harlem at the La Famille, 120, it was on 5th Avenue of 125th Street. Had an organist there, and it was Jack's organ. And his woman was the barmaid. And boy, he used to come in there all the time and play with us. And we had just the best of time playing music together. But working with him was a different story. I was always on edge, and when I was gonna get paid, but playing music with him was great, man. It was great.
I heard a lot of stories about that. I didn't bring those up, but I thought I may not have been able to do because I think you were driving around in a van or something, right? And driving all over the United States.
I was doing the driving.
Making different stops so he could visit folks and stuff and waiting and stuff like that. It sounded really rough to me. I think Jerry Weldon did it. Andy Beals did it. I mean, they all played great because once you come out of there, it's like graduating college. It's like,
that's right.
Where'd you get your degree? I got it at McDuff University.
That's right. That's right.
So
man.
When you get on the basic gig and people are complaining, like, what you all complaining about? You got a bus and a hotel.
yeah, right. Anything's liable to happen with Jack, boy. He'd be taking these pills to stay up, to stay awake. I said, man, let me drive, Jack.
Man, he lived the jazz life, brother.
But then you got a person like Joe Dukes. Joe Dukes was so great. He told me in the elevator, I was making more money than him. And I used to see him playing in Newark when I was in high school when he had Red Holloway and George Benson, you know. But he was a fantastic drummer. He was so good. Max Roach and them used to go see him, you know, but he had a drinking problem, you know, and Jack knew it. So so he had a psychological edge over Joe. Right. So Joe would feel like, I say, it's like a marriage when a husband is abusing a wife.
Right.
You know, but she keeps taking it, tolerating it. She stays in the marriage. That's the way Joe was. Right. And Jack loved Joe, but Jack knew that if Joe drank, Jack can take advantage of him. And every time we get to a new town, they would do a sound check, and he would play up-tempo blues. Jack could play some blues. It's amazing. And he would play and see if Joe could keep up. And one night, we had it was on Thanksgiving in Battle Creek, Michigan. It was a real dismal day. I was kind of homesick and everything. We had dinner over at Bill Dowdy's house. He was a member of the Three Sounds. He played drums. And I said, listen, please don't let Joe drink any alcohol. Please. They didn't listen to me. Joe couldn't play that night. And Bill Dowdy played, it was like a disaster because he hadn't played drums in a long time, you know. Right. Jack is very particular. He's very particular with bass players too, because Jack used to play bass. He even
Right.
told me he played bass with John Coltrane,
Hmm.
which a lot of people don't know. But Jack, he was some kind of musician, excellent
Yeah.
musician. And he played by ear, and he studied, he practiced, and he had us rehearsing a lot too. So
Right.
beautiful experience. You can't get that in college.
Honestly, I don't think we're ever going to see a time like that ever again. At the,
No,
it's kind of like the I always talk about the burst of classical composers that came out around the same, Beethoven and Mozart living in the same time period, stuff like that. It's like
right.
I think for some reason the universe brings these things out, and then it seems to go back.
Hmm.
I don't
You know,
think it ever will happen.
a lot of those players in that time, they had some great stories too. We don't hear about them. But
Right.
when I learned about their stories, man, it made them more interesting to me. These classical composers, they would have been playing jam sessions too. They probably did. A lot that we don't know about their personal lives,
You
but they would,
It's the
you
truth.
know,
That my father used to tell me those stories about Mozart getting drunk and then just going and improvising at the piano, which was spontaneous composition to him. Have a bunch of drinks and he starts just playing, you know,
right,
and it is competition and how he hated to go play for the queen. He had to do that to make money to play these stupid dances for these rich people, and
right,
then
right,
to die penniless too. After people think, oh, Mozart must have been famous. No, Mozart wasn't famous till like 80 years later.
right.
Right?
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
It's almost like the same thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
And then Beethoven getting the venereal disease and going deaf.
yeah.
You know,
Wrote the Ninth Symphony when he was going deaf.
right? You know, and no, you're absolutely right. It makes them more interesting because we kind of idolized. They turned into idols, but they were just folks. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Just folks, man. This and that's.
Yeah. And people talked about Charlie Parker and his drug addiction, but they don't talk about how much he practiced. He said for 3 years, he practiced like 13 hours a day. Paul
Right.
Desmond interviewed him. You hear that interview?
Oh yeah, I know about that one. And also, cats in Pittsburgh told me that don't believe that he didn't practice later in life because Carl Arter was a piano player teaching a lot of people. He used to play saxophone, great musician. And he said
Mm-hmm.
that he knew every time Berg came to town, he stayed at some lady's house outside of town. I guess he was there a lot. And he said, don't believe those stories, man. Bird used to go to this house and practice all day before the gig.
Mm-hmm.
That Bird was always practicing. His drug addiction was a problem, but when he was together, it was hours of doing stuff.
Right.
And
Danny, Danny Bank. I studied clarinet with him. He told me he and him Bird was in the same hotel. He said he played the blues all day long,
Bird,
different keys. Yep. He practiced the blues all day.
there you go.
you know, he was a genius, but he practiced. He worked on his craft.
And when he got with the strings, he was so proud of the strings. Those are my favorite recordings, and I wish we had higher fidelity to really hear what.
Mm-hmm.
Because Bill Crow and those guys told me that you don't really hear Charlie Parker's sound on those records
Mm.
because of, the fidelity and the audio file of the records. Because I did an interview with Bill. If you want, you should check him talking about Charlie Parker, man. It's like,
I did call him today. We're
yeah,
gonna talk next week.
oh,
Thank you for his number.
man. Ask him about Bird, man, because he said he
I
said
will.
he said you had to experience Charlie Parker's sound in the room and the magnificence of each night. He said his ability to
Mm.
be so spontaneous. He talked about how one time they was playing some tune, a different tune that they normally didn't play, and there was this certain bridge which was a little weird, right? But he said
Mm.
he sat there listening. Bird, every time Bird would come to the bridge, he would hear a phrase he wanted to play, right? And
Mm.
but it wouldn't quite fit. But he said Bird, every time he come back around, he would try to put this thing in he heard. That's the way he
Mm.
was. It's just I just can't imagine that because I and Bill said I never, he didn't have lessons or go to music school or someone, you know what I'm trying to say? It was
Yeah.
all about just learning to play the instrument, someone giving you records and Bill actually said I didn't even know what swing was he said, when I got to New York, I said, I'm playing jazz, but I don't know this swing. And he said, it was just this wild drummer. He said, oh man, look, swing, it's dance. And so he said the cat stood up and started dancing. He put on a record, started dancing around the room. Do you see it? Do you feel it? You know what I mean? So,
Yeah,
so when the
yeah.
cat literally explained what swing was, he started dancing. You know. And then Bill started to talk about, after a while, he started to hear that, and you lock the bass in with the drums at the right point. And he too talked about the dancers to be in front of us playing. A lot of times when you play in a club or a bar, people are dancing. And he said you start to hear the and that becomes percussive.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. The rhythm is a very important part of the music.
That's what I was trying to say in that post, with most of the young people didn't understand, because I heard that from the Basie guys too.
And Charlie Parker was a master of the rhythm. That's what separated him from Sonny Stitt to me.
Me too.
Is the rhythmic element. He was a freer player. He can come from anywhere, like start on any beat. That's the freedom he had. He was playing avant-garde because he could play. He could start on any beat. He didn't have to start on one. He started and the one. He started the third beat.
You start on bar 12 and the blues and throw the rhythm section off.
Yeah.
Feel it one. It was George Coleman that hit me to that, because I wanted to play. I was trying to play some outside the chord, and George looked at me one day and said, you just can't play anything, Marshall. He said you got to know what you're doing. You need to sit at your piano and learn. Why'd you play that? He started just laying it out for me. And he actually said, if you want to learn to play avant-garde, you should go back and listen to Charlie Parker. No one was playing more avant-garde than Charlie Parker. Listen to the live recordings.
Yeah.
And I had before, but I started paying closer attention. He's a half step up, half step down. I heard Ornette Coleman. I heard Eric Dolphy. I heard Bird once play something just like Eric Dolphy. When he played live and stuff.
Yeah.
But such
where'd that come from?
Right? Such perfect control of it. And that's what Bill tried to describe to me. He basically said at the time he came to New York, he said there was Charlie Parker and there was everyone else. And Bird knew what he was. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. He had a vast influence on everybody, vast in every instrument. Right. He was just a master, and I don't know of anybody who had that kind of mastery of anything. Because nobody really duplicated him or did really better than him, and maybe other forms of art people built on that. But Bird was such melodically, and what he did at the time hasn't been done since. It's 1955 since he's been gone.
Yeah.
Many years.
I agree.
It
lives on, man.
He had to move over to the when he first started playing, he sounded terrible. He was trying to imitate Charlie Parker.
I remember the alto in the Army or something.
In Navy. Navy in Hawaii. Yeah. But shows you with hard work and the right environment. See what happened? That was back around 1940, around the time I was born, 1949, something like that. They recorded this thing with him. And Miles heard something in the train at that time. And man, what an improvement. I heard him later as if I was back there, but I'm talking about recording wise.
Right.
And it's phenomenal. I had a chance to talk to Johnny Hodges, asked him about Train. He didn't talk too much. I did a concert with Duke Ellington's band. I was in the choir. It's one of those sacred concerts. And I was in the choir from East Orange. We sang at where was it? It was a concert we did. Was it in the Miles Theater? No. One of the theaters in Newark. And I was in heaven, man. When we had a rehearsal, the person that rehearsed the music, I said, oh, this note is wrong. And I was in high school at the time. He didn't believe me, but I was right. And I always, if I saw something wrong, I don't care who it is, I'm gonna tell you that that's wrong.
Right.
So we sang in my part. I had to say Uhuru. I said real strong, Duke like that. So I got a chance to meet all those cats, man. The cats that
Wow.
I idolized. It was Harry Carney, Jimmy Hamilton, Johnny Hodge, and of course Paul Gonzalez. That was my man, Paul
Wow.
Gonzalez. And man, that was a great experience.
That's
And so
amazing.
I asked Johnny about Train. You know, he didn't want to say too much, but Train used to play with Johnny Hodges.
I
You know,
remember. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, and
I heard Sonny playing Village Vanguard one night. Carlos Garnett and I were there. He lit up the room. He walked around. He just played like anything that came to his head. He just played it. And he was playing like a calypso. Man, it was something else. I mean, he just brought everybody up like this. It was like a spiritual experience, man.
he
You know,
was on
Train did it in his way. You know, Sonny
right.
Rollins could do it too.
Sonny was on the junk too in the 50s.
Most of them were.
Because his manager was telling us, I was out with Abdullah Ibrahim, and one of the guys who used to book the clubs, the older guys, was telling us some, and could imitate his voice so perfectly, man. Telling us some crazy ass stories about that. You know, you wouldn't imagine Sonny Rollins being involved in this kind of stuff, man. But it was just like Charlie Parker, man. Just like,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, yeah. When I met Sonny Rollins, he invited me to his house too. We practiced, and he offered me carrot juice for the first time in my life. I looked at it. I said, "What is this?" He said, "If you don't want it, I'll drink it." So I drank it down. You know, he was into the health. He lifted weights. He got a job with a truck so he could lift things. He was very physical. And he was in very good shape at that period. You know,
Right.
very good shape. Because he went after he got I think he went to Lexington, Kentucky to get himself clean.
Right.
And then he went out to Chicago. He didn't want to go to New York because he had too many friends there that were into the drugs. So he wanted to get away from that environment and went to Chicago. And I think that's when Max picked him up. Max Roach. Harold Lamb he wanted to be with his family, went back to California. And then that band they had with Clifford Brown and Sonny Rollins, woo-wee. They did some incredible stuff. That was another great band.
Right.
Miles Davis had his band, and you had Clifford Brown, Sonny Rollins.
Yeah, but I often sit around and think about what would have happened if Clifford Brown had lived longer. Because I had not heard a recording with one of the cats in the Basie band or showed me something where Clifford was starting to play outside of the chord just before he passed away. You know, he was starting to move. Yeah, I don't know where the recording is, and he was starting to move in the direction where the music was going. You know.
You know, they used to rehearse at Eric Dolphy's place in his garage. Because Bertha Hope, who I play with occasionally, she told me, you know, she and Eric went to school together at college.
Right.
Los Angeles City College, I believe. And she used to be there in the rehearsal, man, and because she studied with Richie Powell. And she said they rehearse all day in Eric Dolphy's garage. And she said Clifford Brown would be wiped out. He'd be on the couch sleeping. He'd be tired. They did a lot of rehearsing. You know?
That's interesting. Someone else told me that Eric Dolphy would just practice all day. Anyway, brother, look, we've gone really long, but the last part I just enjoyed talking to you. So,